Hi, everyone.
Yeah, just but it's in the back of my car. I just don't have the little menu one. I have but that it'll just sit on. Okay. Type of thing. It's like, but I have the stand-up one. Like that's the welcome chalkboard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you want to let me respond to this and then?
Do you want to just put it in your car
Yeah.
now? Yeah.
Let me just respond.
Let's see here. It's 12:02. I'm going to give just another second for folks to get logged in. I was technically myself a little late to class. It's always a good sign when the teacher is late to class.
On that stuff, okay.
Yes, I'll probably reach out to.
All right. Well, I'll start to dig in and get us started here. Thanks for joining our university class today. I'm just getting few things pulled up here on my computer to get us started. My thoughts on today were that I was going to leave a lot of time for discussion and questions, because it's sort of a broad topic category, investing in real estate. So I just thought it would be good to leave a majority of time to ask questions and chat about things. So I thought maybe I could kick off our dialogue today in looking at one of the investment properties we have listed for sale, or a couple of them actually, just because they're different ways to look at valuing them. So I'm gonna share my screen here. Please hold while my computer has a little spinning circle on it. Sorry, I don't know why it's not wanting to let me share. It's just spinning. I think I might need to close I'm gonna close the Teams app and come right back, everyone. Sorry, give me 1 second. All right, I'm back here. Let me try this again, see if I can get this to let me share my screen. I may need to see Amanda or Lauren or Scott, if one of you are able to share. I'm just trying to get our website to share on here, and then once it's on, I could navigate us through. This will not give me the ability to do, which is the core of what I need to talk about today. All right, good stuff. So if you can go to the commercial and buy real estate. And why don't you go to the 4505 South 84th Street? You just pull that up on the screen for an example. So we'll talk through a couple different types of properties and how they're priced and valued and looked at as investments. So this building, 4505 South 84th Street, it's between L and the interstate right on 84. So high profile, high traffic location. This building is an industrially zoned property, which in the current market, that's highly coveted. There's very, very strong demand for an industrial property, particularly properties between 5,000 square feet and 25,000 square feet. They are very difficult to find on market right now. So these folks that own this building came to us. They had a Mako franchise, and that did not go well. They had some disputes with Mako. End of day, they were like, it just makes more sense for us to close up this business, sell the real estate, and move on. So we looked at it from a couple angles. Instead of just instantly throwing it on market and saying it's available for sale, we did think about the for lease angle of this property. So it is, as you can see on there, 7,558 square feet. If we took this to market, we might put it on for lease. We might put it on at about $8 a square foot. Honestly, it could rent that high. It might be more of a range around $6 a foot that a property like this would rent for. So doing some kind of quick math on this property, let's just use $6 as kind of a worst case scenario to rent for. $6 per square foot if you're not familiar with commercial valuations on properties. So we would take that 7,558 times $6 a square foot. That gets you a little more than $45,000 a year in rent. The way these leases would work on a property like this is the tenant would pay for things on top of their rent, like the taxes, insurance, maintenance of this property. So there'd be very minimal expense that this property owner would annually deduct from that $45,000. They would deduct their tax expense for like a CPA and a few other minor things, but overall it should really net them around $45,000 a year if they kept this property and owned it as their own investment. So for them, when they went and compared that side by side with their loan, this screen we're looking at shows that big bold loan amount of $450. That's not their loan amount. It was a higher loan amount. It made some sense for them, but they just weren't in the appetite to take the risk with a tenant renting it and potentially defaulting and leaving their building kind of in a gross condition. So one other thing that we could do, though, is take this property to market to find a tenant and then potentially try to sell it. And what we would do then, is take that $45,000 a year and say, what is that worth to an investor to buy this? If we found a good credit tenant that's already in there in place, paying that annually, what does that do for the value of the property? So that is done by using, the easiest method is to do it by using what's called a capitalization rate. Frequently that's abbreviated as a cap rate. So cap rates are kind of a fluid thing. They run with the market. So the market dictates what the cap rate is, meaning how many people are out there that want to buy this property? What are, is it a type of property that's in demand? Is the location a good location? Is the tenant a good credit tenant? All of those things are kind of the the things that get dumped into the funnel, and then at the end of the funnel, what's spit out is the cap rate. In terms of how do you build a cap rate, people are always like, I don't understand where you know a cap rate comes from. It's really from market knowledge and knowing all those things. Good or bad location, good or bad credit tenant, length of a lease, the just desirability factors, I suppose, drive, and then the market. They drive what it is to get to a cap rate. So, and then you can see like, okay, overall in the market, people are wanting that cap rate. The cap rate also equals a return on the property. So if I buy this property in this market, all those things in my head, I'm thinking I'd really like to get a 6.5 to 7% annual return on this property. So that's what a cap rate is. So all those things go into factor what should I be expecting for a cap rate, and what is it that's a return on my money. I know it's kind of a confusing concept, but the more you deal with it, the easier it becomes to understand. And it's confusing because it's not like a easily tangible thing. It's like I said, very fluid. What makes up the concept of a cap rate, and then it changes with the market. So low cap rates are really good for property owners. You know, if I as the buyer am saying, okay, I'm good with a lower cap rate, that means I'm willing to pay more for the property because my money is earning less for me. If I want a 10% return on this property, that means I'm not paying as much for it because my it's working harder for me. So hopefully that helps make a little bit of sense. So the short of all that, in the current market, industrial properties that are good locations, desirable, have a good tenant, they would be anywhere in between a 6% to 7% cap rate, or a 6% to 7% return on your money. So if I go back, a few steps in this discussion and think about that $45,000 a year, and I apply a 6.5 cap rate to the 45,000. So it's fairly simple. You take $45,000, you divide it by 6.5%, and that gets you a value for the property. It gets you a price. So that comes out to just shy of $700,000, $692,000. Now that $45,000 I came up with was again based on 7,558 square feet times $6 a foot for the yearly rent. If we were at $7 a foot, we'd be at $52,000. I do my same math, 6.5%. It gets me a little over $800,000 for the value of the property. That's probably the window that we were going to truthfully rent this building for. They probably would have had to put a little bit of money into fixing it up. So we did that full look to understand like what is the market value of this property if an investor is buying it, or these folks go through that kind of painful process of getting it, in their mind, painful process of getting it rented, fixed up, and then put on the market for sale. So in that case, we determined it wasn't the best route. As you can see on the sheet somewhere on there, the asking price is at $900,000. So we clearly determined it was better to bring this to market vacant. There's a really, really strong demand for owner user opportunities right now, more so than probably investors looking to buy something like this vacant and flip it into an investment for themselves. Not flip it on market, but turn it in, put it on market, rent it, and get a long-term tenant. So that it's an important analysis to consider when you're looking at investment property, either for a client or for a listing, like in this case particular. This is not closed yet, so I will bite my tongue about the price, but I will say we did get it in contract within a couple days of going on market. So that should tell you sort of the tone of the price and details of the contract. It is an owner user looking to use the property. So I always it's really important to understand the nuances of investment and the rate of return, AKA cap rate, and looking at a property kind of eyes wide open at the front end so you don't leave something on the table. We very well could be in a different market, and it could have come out that, you know, that $800,000 because it has a good tenant would have been way more than the $600,000 an owner user would pay for it. So that's a really good analysis to do when you're looking at this for your listing client. I think, you know, maybe a lot of people thought about this class and maybe like it's just like me as the investor being you, not, or you're serving a client who wants to invest money into a property. It's also really important to think about your sellers as their properties as investments. Scott, if you could go back a page or back to the PJ Morgan page. Thank you. I think another one that's interesting to look at, there's a couple here. Why don't we dig into the single family homes first, and then we can go to that 1111 one and talk that through a little bit. If you could download the operating memorandum on that. All right, so this property, I think a lot of people are familiar with. You've probably seen us doing a lot of marketing on these properties. As you can see, there's 7 single family homes. This is an interesting one. This group did interview several residential realtors, several commercial realtors, and then us that wears both the residential and commercial hat because for all things real estate. And that's one reason we won the listing. I almost combined won and lost into one word and called it lost. The reason we won the listing is because we wear the all things real estate hat. Another thing that we did, if you could scroll down, Scott, a few pages, we can still stop and look at the pretty pictures. You don't really have to. You can go to more of the summary page. This one right here. So an interesting thing that happened when they called us is they were really testing our knowledge and skill. And this is Johnny's lead. He brought me onto it. He asked me to participate in this with him, you know, based on history and experience I have. And they really did put me through the ringer on our first couple Zoom meetings in terms of just that, what's your knowledge and history. So, you know, the first dialogue I had with them was, or one of the early ones was about the value, kind of straight to the chase. What's the value of our property before we get into all the marketing nuances? And just, you know, knowing what I know over experience here, getting to know property management really well, analyzing rental houses and what it costs to buy one, what it costs to run one, and then what it costs to, and what your, you know, end of day net income is. Like, I've spent a lot of time learning that and knowing that and observing it and seeing it fluctuate. And honestly, when I was looking at this house, I thought about multifamily properties because the idea with multifamily is you get, you know, a little bit of economy of scale versus one rental house. So you have one roof on an apartment building, you have one dumpster, you have one parking lot. Here you have 7 driveways, 7 roofs, 7 everything. So honestly, what I did when I talked to him is I said, let's talk, I bet I can figure some of this out, where your head is. Why don't you tell me what your total annual rent is? So they spit that out. And I'm cheating a little because the numbers are right in front of me. But I said, okay, $200,000 for your annual rent. Give me a second. And I quick in my head, pulled to the side. And here's what I know from just studying property over time. You cannot run a rental house or an apartment building less than, I mean, the cost of your operating those properties is anywhere from 35 to 45% of your income every year. There are swings in that, like if it's new construction, you might be, really, really low. And if it's an old ratty awful building, it could be 65% of your income. But a well-run, well-oiled machine will run in that range. And that's your taxes, your insurance, your lawn care if you have it, and some of these, other recurring expenses. So they told me how. I've then asked the little questions: how they operate the property, what do they do? So pulled to the side, zeroed in on my percentage number, and then spit out what I thought was their NOI, which you see on here listed NOI $120,000. I'll go into NOI in a second, but I on the phone spit out to them. I still remember it was like $116,500, and they were like in shock. They're like, "How did you get so close to our bottom line?" But it's through looking at sheets like this page over and over and over again and studying them is how I got there. It's not so exciting. It's not so sexy. It's not the most fun thing to do, look at spreadsheets and operating numbers on properties all the time, but it's how you really start to zero in and ask questions about things. I really like to compare them side by side, like a property we own with one that's being marketed, or when I say we own, maybe like we own the management of it. So I could go to Kara or Rochelle and say, "Hey, Kara, can you run me a midtown single family home that's, well maintained and well rented? Can you run me a cash flow statement for a year on it?" And then I might go to Rochelle and say, "Hey, Rochelle, I need Oakbrook at 108th and Blondo. Can you get me the cash flow?" And then I know that is 20 some units. It's, a B grade apartment building. So if I find a B grade apartment building online or that midtown house, I love to sit down with those expenses side by side and compare them. Because you learn a ton. Our expenses, you're going to find the clear and actual picture. And the materials you get from people are often not the clear and accurate picture. So you can zero in and start to ask questions about trends and, why does their sheet not have lawn care on it? Why does it not have trash removal on it? Where is that item's missing from the analysis? So what was originally posed to me on this sheet that I'm comparing our property side by side with was that the expenses are only 25% or maybe 30%. And Ryan was wrong. Look, it can be done. But so far, I've not found one to be accurate with that, because to the point I just said about lawn care, like, dude Joe owns the apartment building and dude Joe mows the lawn himself. So he does not put an expense line item in. He doesn't pay himself for it, and he never put it into the expense lines because it doesn't cost me anything. Well, it costs him his time and it costs him the gas and the mower and all that crap, but he doesn't put it down on there. Also, dude Joe has owned this property for a really long time, so the taxes haven't really caught up to what they should be. Whereas, feels like we always get stuck with the accurate taxes, but it's a really good way to sit down and learn this stuff, is to spend most of your time figuring out expenses on the front end, because you'll get to the, kind of crux of how these properties operate and what it means. And then you can look at the income side of things and how can I play with the income and improve it. It's really hard to cut expenses on a property and keep it a really good property. You can improve it and get your income up, but those base core expenses are frequently hard to cut dramatically. There are ways you can find savings and should, but that's how you start to learn all that stuff, is really just dig in of what does it take to run a property? So I probably beat this point to death, but it's a lot of the process. So back to our example on this page, knew their income, I spit out the percentage of expenses and hit their NOI within a few $1,000s. So NOI stands for net operating income, if you're not familiar with that. So, the way an accounting cash flow sheet runs, you start at the top of the page with income, and, income can come from rent, parking rent, late fees, all these things. And then you get to gross income, and then you itemize the expenses out. And then at the bottom of all that, what you get at the end of the day is your net operating income. So investors in real estate zero in on that number keenly, the net operating income. I will frequently say there's another line item below that where you start to go into debt service for the property. So what is their mortgage? What is their annual payment on the mortgage? That gets you down to the next accounting line item, which is cash flow. We don't care about cash flow when we're valuing property, and we don't care about the current owner's mortgage 95% of the time. Unless that mortgage is assumable, which is super rare, we really don't care about that component, because those are derivative of the owner of the property. Like, that current owner could have only taken out, a 50% loan. Like, they had half the cash, so they only needed a loan for 50%. The rate could have been really favorable for them. They had terrible credit, but still got the loan because they have a lot of cash, and the rate was really high. So we don't really give a crap about that component. The value of the property is based upon that $120,000. That is the constant, not the cash flow. Other things that can change cash flow is you have a really expensive attorney, or you are your own CPA and do your taxes yourself. Those come out after this NOI line item. So those aren't relative to the investment as it moves forward in its life cycle. So NOI, or again, net operating income, is really your key for determining how much this property can sell for. So after we got down to the root of $120,000 is what you'll get every year if you buy this property, we then had a dialogue about capitalization rate again, or your cap rate. And in Omaha, multifamily properties and single family homes, either for owner occupant or for rentals, are really in high demand, as you all know. If you don't follow the commercial much, you may not know that multifamily is in super high demand, but it is similarly in high demand as single family houses. That'd be a good comparison. Everybody wants it right now. So that means people are willing to pay more for it right now, and they will expect to earn less on their money. So you'll see here, we have noted a cap rate of 5.4%. So we took that $120,000, divided it by 5.4%, and got to $2,250,000 for the value of this property. So someone who buys this property, they could, if they paid the $2,250,000, another way to look at this kind of in a backwards way is if they pay that $2,250,000, at the end of the day, end of the year, they will earn $120,000, and that will have been 5.4% return for their investment of $2,250,000. So those three numbers are kind of your key when you're looking at investment values or investment properties and how to value them. I know I'm probably repeating what I just said on several times, especially what I just went through on 84th Street with that, the cap rate and the pricing. But this process, the first time you experience it, and the second, and maybe up until the seventh time you experience it, is sort of confusing. It's like, wait, how do I do it? Do I divide the cap rate into the 120? Yeah. Honestly, seasoned agents still get confused with this process a little bit. And sometimes it's just clerical with the math, honestly. But those, I'm repeating myself because it's probably new to a lot of you, and it does, just get a little bit confusing with how this rolls. Let's see here. I guess maybe instead of me just keep rambling, I'll take a minute to see if anyone wants to ask any questions about this process or either of these two properties that we've gone over so far. No questions. All right. Either I'm doing really good or we've confused everyone. Probably the latter. Scott, could you go back to the PJMRE page and pick up that 1111 property? It's kind of an interesting one. If you could grab the flyer on it too. And if you could scroll down for me. Okay. So, interesting thing on this one. Maybe, is there another page on this, Scott? If you could keep going, I'm sorry. Okay, go back up to the that page right there. So you'll see here, this is formatted a little differently on this flyer by design. This property, so this property I'm not working on, Colleen has worked on this one. It's in the heart of Benson, so it's really desirable. The tenant who moved into here spent a substantial amount of money improving the space. I'm trying to remember how much money they put into it, but it was kind of a jaw dropper when you heard it. So this property owned by an out-of-town investor that Colleen's working with, it's a retail property. So in the current state of the world with COVID over the last, 14 months, 16 months, whatever you want to call it, retail's been a little dicier. A service related, so a bar, has obviously been impacted. So it's a little riskier investment. If I'm looking at it as the investor, I'm thinking, ooh, I wonder how this guy did over COVID. Honestly, I know just from the owner of that bar, it was pretty slow at the beginning. He got his hustle going and I think did okay. But it's still a little scary. If I'm buying this building and hoping this tenant pays rent, it's a factor to look at. But because the location is so good and because they did such a great job remodeling the building, it is a desirable building. It's one of the higher rents in the neighborhood that this guy's paying because the landlord paid for a lot of the remodel. So he has to get that back, the guy that did it, and he needed to charge more rent. So again, my investor hat is thinking, okay, this guy is, in a really challenging economic time for service-related businesses, or potentially, we're coming out of it, but it's still risky. If he fails to pay the rent, this is a really specifically designed space. And am I going to find someone else to pay as much rent for it? So those are all the things, like you have to kind of put that hat on of the buyer and think, are they really going to, jump on board with this? They're going to ask all of those questions. So I need to be able to almost answer those more than I need to answer about the rental amount and the cap rate on this one. It was really something Colleen spent quite a bit of time studying and thinking about and looking at rent trends in the neighborhood over the last few years, so she could really talk to that and answer that question. If this tenant defaulted, what is that going to do for your investment? How fast can we get it rented? How much are we going to get it rented for? And then what does that manipulate your net operating income to and the cap rate? She built a pretty solid case to show that there's not a lot for rent in Benson. There's not much of this new terms, sorry, kind of newer condition. There's a lot of great properties, but only a couple that are as new. So she, built the case that this is highly desirable. It would still get a top rent if they moved out. We're far enough into kind of recovery mode that there should be people out there willing to jump on this. She also took the angle that with the guy selling it, like, I bet someone might buy this and then they could eventually be the user of the property. So she put all of that into her analysis before coming up with the price. So it's not always so simple as this guy pays this much rent. The cap rate in the market is, X, and that's how I get to the price. You kind of have to think about some of the other outside forces and factors. So since she built such a strong case, Colleen said, I'm going to go with one of the highest deals I think I can get in the neighborhood on a, price per square foot for the building basis. And I'm really going to kind of push this cap rate. Cap rates are trending for retail space anywhere between, there's kind of a broad range, 6.5% to 8%, depending on all the factors that we've talked about that go into it. So good properties are closer to a 6.5% right now. So you'll see on her flyer, she went at 6.7. She did get this building in contract within, I want to say, a week of it going on market. So I think she did, a great job with her analysis on this property, kind of getting her ducks in a row and getting kind of squared away with how to substantiate the value. So I think those were the three main examples of like valuing investment property that I wanted to take time talking about today. I hoped there would be some questions, or expected more than hoped. So I would say if you still have a question, pipe up, I'm happy to answer them. I can also spend some time talking about like, investing in single family homes. If anyone would like to talk about that in a little more detail, we can talk about any kind of investment property. Maybe you expected this class to have a different angle with investment. I'm happy to talk to that tune too. If anyone has anything they'd like, I'll give a second for anyone to ask questions. And if not, I'm going to keep talking to fulfill our time. All right, I'll keep talking to fulfill our time, which is not very usual for me. Usually I ramble and ramble till I'm blue in the face and run out of time. Well, so single family homes, when someone comes to me brand new looking to invest in real estate, and I sit down with them, I talk about their goals. What do they want? Why do they want to invest in real estate? What are they looking for? I would say over 50% of the time, maybe even over 80% of the time, I will hear people say, ooh, I want to own a building. I want to own either an apartment building, that's very common to hear, or I want to own, a cool retail building or a cool office building. And I spent some time like really talking to them about what does that mean to own that property. Like it's interesting how many people run into it after doing a little research, and they might have gone from a little fear to 100% excitement like that. It's sort of shocking to me, but they really don't know, because when you read online, you just, as you guys know, in the practice of real estate, it's hard to get the essence of everything. So I will often try to like reel those like people with no experience investing in real estate. I'll try to reel them back in and get them to think about buying a rental house. Like it's the easiest first step into investing in real estate, I think. It's something you're relatively familiar with. Like if you're investing in rental property of any kind, you probably own your own home, most likely, not always, or have bought one before, and just have familiarity with that process. So that first level of groundwork is somewhat familiar, in terms of a process. Like I'm going to go to a bank. I'm going to find out how much I can get for a loan. Then I'm going to go look for the property. I'm going to do a home inspection, and then I buy it and put it up for rent. And really, they understand that process fairly easily. And then I can talk them through what does it mean to rent your house and why you should hire us to manage and rent your house. So a lot of people are taken aback when I do that with them. Some are offended, frankly, that I've taken them from their dream path of commercial real estate to a rental house. But I explained to them, okay, well, so this rental house, it may only rent for, let's say it rents for $1,200 a month, and you have these sights of a big cash flow on a property, but we're going to stick with your rental house. It's $1,200 a month, and your tenant moves out after year one. Most of our properties we see turned back over in reasonably good condition. Almost all of them, we can cover any damages done by a deposit, and we've got it back up for rent and rented within a 30-day window of vacancy, if not less. In today's market, they're rented, there's like a request for same-day turnover, barely enough time to even clean the place. So it's a pretty easy investment for you, and the risk level goes down. That means your return on the property also comes down. Like that cap rate for single family houses is often in a 3.5 to sometimes you can eke out a 6% return, but they're substantially lower than commercial, but they have a lot less risk. And then I'll go into it a little further with that client and say, let's say you did buy the dream commercial property. It's got your favorite restaurant in it, your favorite fast food restaurant. It's a Taco Bell, and you really like the Nacho Supreme and bean burritos, and you're going to keep it in business. But for whatever reason, it's went out of business. So now you had what you thought was a 10-year lease with Taco Bell on your building, and they're gone. What are we going to do? We'll re-rent it. Another fast food restaurant will. Okay, great. Your second favorite of McDonald's is going to rent it. Not really. That's not going to happen. And even if they did, that building is not going to work for them. We need to redo the whole exterior, the whole interior, probably change the drive-through. That is a crap ton of money to come out of pocket. And whose pocket is it going to come out of? If you get super lucky and win the day, they will pay for everything because you have the best property ever and they're willing to do it. But that is not going to happen. Just safe to say. You're going to have to fork some cash into that property. So you just bought your $2 million Taco Bell 2 years ago. Now they've gone out of business. And now you all of a sudden need to come up with $400,000 to give your second favorite McDonald's the money they need to start to redo that building. And McDonald's is probably going to spend $600,000, $800,000 too on top of your 400, but you have to fork out a lot of cash if there's a default on a commercial tenant. It's just a very realistic thing that can happen. So that was a best case scenario, me using those corporate names. A lot of these investment properties have local tenants in it. You look at their financials, but you never know what's going to happen with them. So it really does, create a bigger risk in these commercial properties. You all see it all the time when you drive around town of people going into default and things closing and like, oh, wouldn't have guessed that would happen. Like I would have never guessed right outside my window that Old Chicago would have closed up during the pandemic. Like they used to be the top performing Old Chicago in the state of Nebraska. So now that landlord is forking over a whole lot of cash to redo the space. I think it's Hacienda Real that's going in, and they have to like repaint the exterior because the old Chicago signs are there so long. So that's a big, like I've just really put my my whole life into this investment if you've never invested. Now, if you've got the wealthiest client ever, they're not going to care about that. But reality is like real people, once you start talking to them through, they're like, oh, that is really overwhelming. Like I do probably need to start on a little bit easier basis of investing in real estate. So then the person who was offended that I told them they should buy a rental house all of a sudden starts to go, oh, okay, that makes more sense. The other really nice thing about buying rental houses is, well, I think there's a lot of benefit to it. The other benefit is you can start to build them up a little more slowly, and they will, in Omaha, traditionally appreciate at a really steady rate. We've had a few good years of high rate of appreciation. So, you move forward a few years, you own 3 rental houses, you might have built up enough equity in there that you can now refinance your 3 rental houses with 1 loan, with 1 bank, and then you've actually got some extra cash out of the deal because they've appreciated, your rents have gone up, and the way you refinance 1 loan, you can grab some money out of it now and bring my 4th house into the portfolio. And it can start to flow better for you, and then you have a steady base. Or maybe on that, instead of that 4th house, okay, I've got some extra savings, I've got a little cash to pull out from this refinance of these, and I feel confident that I have a better understanding of investing in real estate. Now's the time to buy my apartment building, and I've got my commercial lender on board, so I can go pursue that. So it's just an way easier path into managing the investment world. We've done this with clients time and time again, and can drive you around town and point at now buildings they've bought because they went exactly that path with the rental houses. Like the Fuddruckers building on 72nd and Dodge was one that Travis Freeman, who we've worked with, he owns Bright Ideas, and when Bright Ideas started getting more and more successful, he bought rental houses, and then we coached him into buying investment properties. So he bought that in that corner, that Fuddruckers property, I want to say in 08 or 09 when the market was real low. A bank was foreclosing on it and called him and said, we know you have a high balance sheet. You have a lot of cash. We've seen your balance sheet. Would you like to take this off our books? And so we helped him with studying that. And then someone called on him wanting to buy it, and it was a great opportunity. He did really good with that investment from the life cycle of it. I would say he probably, if that had been his first investment, he might have been either too nervous to do it, or it just wouldn't have gone as smooth. He wouldn't have had the banking relationships that he had from building up, 20 some rental houses that he owns. So another nice thing about rental houses too is that if you, like in this high market, you might have one that kind of performed poorly over time. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't as good as you had hoped. Great, kick that 1 rental house off and put that cash into another investment of some kind. And then you keep the rest of your rental houses. You're still getting cash flow from the ones that did really good for you. Whereas if you have a commercial building and overall it does good, but there's like 1 tenant space that's always hard to rent, you can't just sell off that 1 tenant space. You have to sell the whole building, which has a lot of consequences. So that's another thing we always like to preach to people about investing their first go around. All right, I feel like I have just yammered straight for 50 minutes. I'm gonna open it up one more time for questions, and then if there are none, we'll let you guys out a little earlier than planned. Going once. Amanda, did you have any, or did you just take yourself off mute?
Oh, no, I saw, oh, there it is. There's a question in the comments. If you could talk about an exit strategy, when would be the best time to exit a commercial property?
Thank you for pointing that out. I did not see it. Great question. There's always the old adage that the best time is when you don't have to. That's usually the best time. But so if really you want to understand your property, sort of in the way I did that, that very first building we looked at with Mako, like those folks like if we own that as an investment, really doing the analysis of, is it better to have it rented or is it better to have it vacant? I think that's an important thing to look at. It's unusual, honestly, that it's better to have it vacant. It's usually better to have it rented. So in that vein, it's the best time to sell your commercial investment property is when you've renewed a lease with a tenant and it's a fresh lease. So, you know, if you have a 5-year lease with a tenant, getting it on market in the first 6 months of that brand new lease is your best window of time to sell it, because then the buyer of that property still has 4.5 years, 4 years left on the lease in that quote unquote guaranteed income. I use the quote for guaranteed because you never know, but if it's a good solid tenant, they should have the 4 years of income. So that's the best time, is when you have still a long term of lease on it. Unless for some reason, oddball case like our 84th Street one, you have that strange it's better to be vacant scenario. But that's generally the best time. There's not a seasonally best time. You will see when there's a presidential election and that like window of change of administration, there is traditionally a lot of things that will come to market around that time, because people who've owned something for a long time, they get nervous about, I'm going to sell it and the taxes I have to pay will change with this new administration. So I better get it on market and get my lower taxes paid. You see that a lot, that kind of spike every 4 years in that little window, but otherwise there's no like seasonal flow of it. You know, of course, nice weather means people are happier and they're more inclined to buy any real estate or anything, but you'll still see stuff happen in December, January, all those times. Good question. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all for coming to my TED Talk, my Ryan Talk. I appreciate you making the time to be here. Hopefully this was helpful, and if not, I welcome the feedback on how to make it better, for sure. Bye.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you.